Deadloch Season 2 recently finished airing on Amazon Prime, an Australian black comedy riddled with sapphic characters, and after what was a fantastic first season, I of course had to check it out to see if they were able to follow up this delightful show with an equally engaging second outing. In Season 1, Deadloch introduced Dulcie Collins, a detective turned senior sergeant who had moved to a bucolic small town in Tasmania called Deadloch, which was full of lesbians, and found herself saddled with Eddie Radcliffe, a brash, chaotic detective from Darwin, come to investigate a series of murders targeting men. While Dulcie is trying to manage Eddie and catch a serial killer, she is also navigating a marriage with wife Cath that is on the rocks. By the end of the season, they figure out who the killer is. Dulcie has developed a solid partnership with Eddie and agrees to leave this little lesbian town not only to help Eddie investigate the death of her previous work partner who died under suspicious circumstances, but also to prioritize her relationship with Cath. If you want to hear my full thoughts on Season 1, I did a review, link in the title cards. So Season 2, as hinted at the end of Season 1, throws us into the swampy heat of Darwin in northern Australia, where the investigation into Eddie's dead partner has stalled and the police are ruling it as a suicide. Dulcie is struggling not only with the climate, but with some kind of malaise which is leaving her listless. Cath wants to head out in their camper van to tour the continent, but Dulcie is trying to get herself onto the investigation into two tourists that have disappeared and are suspected dead instead. It seems the idea of early retirement and aimless travel doesn't hold the same appeal to her as it does to Cath, suggesting that things between our sapphic ladies are not entirely resolved. With a male chauvinist as the lead investigator, Dulcie's hopes of getting onto the big investigation are quickly dashed. However, she finds herself pulled into another murder investigation when a severed head is found floating in the river in none other than Eddie's hometown of Barra Creek. With Eddie confronted by an estranged criminal father and a town she had long left behind, which causes her to spin out a fair bit, they must follow the clues to uncover the mystery of who that arm belongs to and why they were chopped up to become crocodile food, with plenty of unexpectedly sapphic shenanigans along the way. So for me, the big question was, could a show that hit it out of the park so beautifully in Season 1 be able to recreate that magic while basing its second season in a different location with a different cast of kooky characters? Could they deliver another darkly humorous and macabre murder mystery that would keep me guessing but tie it all together in a way that said something interesting? For the most part, yes, they did. It was a solid season with enough story threads to keep the mystery dynamic and once again clinching all of the threads together to a satirically satisfying conclusion, although I do have to confess I didn't hook into this season quite as much as I did the first for reasons that I'll go over in a bit. I can see the successful blueprint of Season 1 being applied. Another small town, zany inhabitants, many of whom could be possible suspects, an Indigenous storyline, the fabulous and casual inclusion of diversity, the twists and turns in the investigation with some solid end-of-episode hooks, the ongoing tension between Dulcie and Eddie's characters, an evolution of Dulcie and Cath's dynamic, and a strong personal through-line, this time for Eddie's character, part of which, let me just say, was so very queer in the most delightful way. As was I delighted by the casual inclusion of so much general queerness, which I will of course break down later in the video. The show managed to hit that kind of hyper-specificity of Australian culture, brought to life by vivid world building, along with incisive commentary on a number of social and political elements in a similar way to Season 1. I also have to mention that I did enjoy the Dulcie and Eddie relationship. It's lovely to see a queer friendship. It's not something we often see, and perhaps my favourite moment was at the very end when Eddie shouted at the top of her lungs she loved Dulcie because it was the only way she could get it out. Hilarious and adorable. But I do have some quibbles. In Season 1, I had one criticism, and it was that Eddie took a minute to acclimatise to. Without the revelation about why she was such a loose cannon and her subsequent calming down, as I said in my original review, I don't think I could have gotten through the show. It felt like the same thing happened here. Eddie's unhinged behaviour and general shouting was a lot, especially when added to the family of the murdered man who also did a lot of shouting, along with Dulcie limply navigating her way through the investigation, showing a perplexing lack of backbone when it came to letting the locals railroad her attempts to find out information. It made for a generally chaotic first couple of episodes. It felt like perhaps the show was trying just a bit too hard to be funny with its dark, farcical comedy. So much was happening, all at maximum intensity, which felt overwhelming, but then with episode 3, something shifted. Was it me just locking in on the tone of the show once again, or was it that the show shifted gears? I don't know, but I felt like it found its rhythm again. Now, there is a reason for all of this. Apparently, there is a phenomenon called the build-up season in the Northern Territory as the oppressive hot humidity builds until the monsoon hits. It can cause people to go, as they say, troppo, due to stress, fatigue, and irritability. And oh boy, was there a lot of irritability going around, so it was a purposeful choice, just one that I found to be a lot, although I did appreciate the way the weather was used to symbolize the building up of the narrative to the explosive climax just as the monsoon hit. So that was one reason I didn't quite hook into this season as much. My other quibble was how Dulcie and Cath's relationship was handled this season. Season 1 set up the tension of how Dulcie's affair had impacted them as a couple and how they were trying to consciously communicate their way through their marital issues. It made for some lovely humour, and Cath was and remains a delight with her fierce loyalty to Dulcie. The second season establishes that though Dulcie has decided to walk away from her senior sergeant position in Deadloch, she is struggling with this idea of retiring, which is why she throws herself into the first investigation she gets her hand on. It felt a bit like it was backtracking on where they ended up at the end of season 1 somewhat, but it was a backtrack I was fine to get behind if it meant that we got to dig deeper into Dulcie's psychology for why she struggles divorcing herself from a job that seems to swallow her up. But that didn't ultimately happen. While the story thread was set up, I felt like they failed to develop it to its full potential. There were a few scattered moments, notably when Cath confronts Dulcie's decision to call in a piece of evidence that could incriminate Eddie. It was a great speech, very much needed at that point in the story, but it stuck out oddly to me. It felt like Cath had been occupying her time without much issue, and then suddenly she breaks out into this grand speech without any build-up. It also meant that the ultimate place they end up in, which by the way is good, didn't have the emotional resonance it could have. I guess I wanted just a bit more space for their relationship to breathe, given a season 3 doesn't appear to be on the cards, given where things end up, and perhaps part of the issue is that the season was 2 episodes shorter than season 1. I did feel the effects of that on the storyline. There were a lot of storyline threads that were being fitted into the 6 episodes, each with weighty implications, but with 2 less hours to tell them. They did ultimately end up getting less depth and feeling a bit rushed. The racist cop targeting a black kid, for example. Eddie's love story could have done with a bit more fleshing out, in my opinion. Speaking of Eddie's love story, I do have to say that the amount of gay in the season was surprisingly robust. There was a clear effort to include a lot of diversity, be it race, sexuality, or gender, by writers Kate McCartney and Kate McLennan, affectionately known as the 2 Kates in the show. At first, it looks like Dulcie and Cath are the odd ones out, the only gays in the village, but then there is the daughter of the murdered man, who it turns out is more than just pals with her BFF, while also, ironically, being the most vocally homophobic person around. Then there is the 2 missing women backpackers who turn out are way more than just gal pals. The 2 detectives that step in to investigate evidence that could incriminate Eddie give off strong sapphic couple vibes with how in tune they are with each other. Leo, the deadpan journalist who helps the investigation, is genderqueer with they/them pronouns, which seems to help Eddie figure out something about themselves, and the casual way in which Eddie outs themselves is delightful. And when they tell Dulcie about it, I did enjoy how easily Dulcie starts to use she/they pronouns for them without blinking an eye in the middle of a major argument, or how everyone else hearing Dulcie use they/them for Eddie, including their boss, doesn't blink an eye either. It's rare enough to have one genderqueer character, but to have the lead as well as another major character, love it. And it makes so much sense for Eddie too. But it doesn't stop there. Eddie is having a further revelation about their identity when they start to develop some unexpected feelings for the local park ranger Mickey that they used to go to school with. Again, the very casual way in which Eddie hits Dulcie up for tips on flirting with girls is perfect, and then how they fail their way into a relationship with said crush felt very right. I was all there for a butchy straight woman, of course, but if I had to choose, I'd go for this. So while I wasn't sure how they were going to top a small town full of lesbians, they still managed to jam-pack the season with a lot of queers, which is honestly so rare and precious. It was giving a League of Their Own vibes with the amount of representation, and to have such a successful show, because season 1 did very well for Amazon, be so unabashedly not just sapphic but queer, makes it one of a few handful of shows like that out there. Finally, I wanted to comment on the ending, so spoilers from here. There was something ridiculous and satisfying with how all the bad guys of the piece ended up dead. To have the croc come up and chomp down on the insufferable Jason was poetic justice given his illegal croc hunting operation. How Colonel Culkin, with his smarmy obsequiousness, would rather die than face the consequences of his corruption. The horrible wife to the murdered man meeting her end at the hand of a cop who thought she was disciplining one of the black kids because of racism. Given the amount of corruption that Dulcie Dulcie and Eddie were faced with within the police force, it seemed like an incredibly healthy thing for them to quit, and the idea of Dulcie and Cath running around as storm chasers a la Twister, while Eddie loves it up with their new squeeze Mickey, felt like the perfect place to leave them in. It was a whole heap of fun, absolutely worth the watch, even if I felt like it didn't quite have the polish and punch of season 1. What did you guys think? I want to give a shout out to my Patreon members whose support is so vital to this channel. Thank you so much, and until next time, lady lovers.